Section 2.5, an introduction to solving basic equations. The goal is to end up with the variable, the letter, on one side of the equal sign balancing a number on the other side. So let's briefly talk about what the variable represents. In the given equation, 2x minus 5 equals to -8, the equation means that we're looking for 2 times some unknown number minus 5, which will equal to a -8. Again, that's 2 times a number we don't know what the number is. When subtracted by 5 will equal to a -8. So we use the unknown number and represent that unknown number as a variable x, a letter. So in order to begin solving the equation, let's follow the 3 steps below. First, we're going to add 5 to both sides of the equation, and I'll explain why. We want to isolate the variable and its coefficient on this side of the equation first. The only way to do that is to undo the subtraction of 5. In order to undo the subtraction of 5, I have to add 5, which will of course equal to 0, and that allows me to isolate the variable term and its coefficient on the left side of the equation. But if I add 5 to one side of the equation, I have to balance by adding 5 to the opposite side of the equation. Therefore, -8 plus 5 is equal to a -3. So we finished the first step. Our second step, we must divide by the coefficient of the variable term. In this case, the coefficient is a +2 in order to find the solution. So by dividing one side by 2, I must balance my equation and divide the opposite side by the same number. This allows my 2's to divide out, leaving me with my letter, or my variable x, equals to a -3/2. So let's discuss what the solution means to us. This means that 2 times a -3/2 minus 5 will equal to a -8. So a -3/2 is the unknown number. Next, you're going to solve 3 equations. Pause the video, solve your equations, and then play the video to see if your answers match my answers. Pause now. So, for the first equation, we have 2.2x plus 7.6x equals to 127.4. Now, we must be really careful, and hopefully you identify the fact that these two terms both have x, which means they are like terms. So the first step is to combine like terms, and like terms will always appear on the same side of an equation. So we'll start by adding 2.2x and 7.6x, which equals to 9.8x. So now that we've simplified our equation, we can move to our last step. Since we're only left with 9.8x equals to 127.4, our last step is to divide by the coefficient. So the coefficient is a +9.8. I'm going to need to divide both sides by the coefficient in order to maintain balance. Since both 9.8's divide out positively, I'm left with x equals 127.4 divided by 9.8, which equals to a +13. For the next equation, first we need to identify that the variable term is on the right side of the equation, so that's where we're going to start. And remember, Our goal is to balance the equation while maintaining the fact that our letter must remain isolated on one side of the equation while balancing the number on the other side. So starting with the right side of the equation, in order for the variable term and y, which is y, and its coefficient to be the only term on this side of the equation, I need to focus on the addition of 18. So instead of adding 18 to 18, I need to subtract 18. Subtracting 18 undoes the addition of 18, which allows me to leave the variable term and its coefficient on this side of the equation. But we must remember, if I subtract a number from one side, I must subtract the same number from the opposite side of the equation. So the equal sign does not change its position. We bring down 13 minus 18, which leaves us with a negative 5, and that equals to our variable term, which is 5y. So now that we're at the last step, we simply divide by the coefficient, which is a positive 5. And if I divide one side by positive 5, I need to divide both sides by positive 5. 5 divided by 5 divides out positively, and y equals to a negative 1. So again, be very careful with your initial step. Your goal is to focus on where is my variable term and how do I manage to get that variable term to be the only term on that side of the equation. For the next equation, we first start by simplifying the left side of the equation using the distributive property. 6 times 6w is 6w, and 6 times a negative 15 is a minus 80. Minus 90 equals to a negative 18. Now that we've used the distributive property to simplify the left side of the equation, we can begin to solve. So our goal is to make sure that 6w is the only term on the left side of the equation while balancing the numbers on the opposite side. So my first step would have to be to undo the subtraction of 90. I can only do that by adding 90. So if I add 90 to one side of the equation, we must also add 90 to the opposite side of the equation. Now that we're left with 6w equals 72, our remaining step is to divide by the coefficient of the variable. Our coefficient is a positive 6, so I need to divide both sides by 6. Since the 6's divide out positively, we have a remaining w equals to 12. Let's look at one more equation. The next equation is an equation that has variable terms on both sides. Here we want to make sure that we eliminate one of the variable terms. So for demonstration purposes, let's focus on eliminating the variable term that is on the right side of the equation. This means that I would need to subtract 12x from 12x in order for that variable term to eliminate. But keep in mind, if I subtract 12x from one side of the equation, I must subtract the same 12x from the opposite side's like term. So subtracting 12x from 10x is correct. I could not subtract 12x from 1. Making sure that I don't change the position of my equal sign, bring down what's left on both sides of the equations. So 10x minus 12x is a negative 2x. And we also have plus 1. On the opposite side of the equation, we bring down the negative 9. Now we're back to solving a basic equation. My next two steps will include subtracting 1 from both sides of the equation. which leaves us with negative 2x equals a negative 10, and dividing by the coefficient of the variable, which is a negative 2, because we want those coefficients to divide out positively, we're left with x equals a positive 5. For more practice, go to my math lab and work through section 2.5.